Hi, I'm Kevin J. Anderson, and you're listening to Two Guys Talking Rush.
Guys talking rush two guys talking rush two guys talking rush two guys talking rush two guys.
And now, get ready for the Two Guys Talking Rush podcast with your hosts, John Kane and Dan Buxton.
Now, I like to tell a story. I was the skinny kid with bad haircut and hand-me-down clothes and thick glasses in high school, and I read science fiction, I read comic books, and let's face it, I was not going to get a girlfriend. So all these songs on the top 40 about, oh, my girlfriend just left me, they just didn't mean anything to me. But,
right.
2112 does mean something to me. That's really cool. And I really just dove into that kind of music. And even if it wasn't like me writing a short story that is the story version of the song, just the images that the music would bring to mind, and the turns of phrase and the imaginative vistas it would bring me, the music of Rush and other prog rock, but Rush was my main one. They just sort of inspired me into writing more science fiction and fantasy.
When and where did you land your first book deal? Take us back to the origins of your long career.
Okay, well, I find, even though I'm teaching grad students now and stuff, all of my experience in breaking into publishing is irrelevant now, because the whole world has entirely changed as far as how you get a story published or a book published. But in my day, in the 70s and 80s, the path was you wrote a bunch of short stories and got them published in science fiction magazines. And with those credits, you got an agent, and then you wrote your first novel, and then the agent would send them to the major New York publishers. And so I had dozens of short stories that I had published, and I had an agent. And I was about 24 years old at the time, and it was time for me to write my first novel. And so I had this really cool idea for sort of a gothic horror, hard science fiction murder mystery, another one of those, about a future where instead of building robots to do everything, they just sort of took, like, your human body is this perfectly wonderful machine. And once you die, the machine is still there. So I made up that basically high-tech zombies, they would jumpstart dead bodies and use them to handle the toxic wastes and dig ditches and do they were called servants, and they did all the dirty work. And my story's about a guy who's found murdered on page 1, and they bring him back to life as a servant inadvertently to serve the guy who murdered him. And he starts getting flashbacks of his first life. And we're in this whole world of sort of a dystopian far future world where there's no swimming in the heavy water, no singing in the acid rain. You need someone to talk to and someone to sweep the floors, and all of this built up. And I was plotting this book just when Rush brought out Grace Under Pressure. And as I'm plotting the book and I'm listening to Red Sector A and The Enemy Within and Distant Early Warning and The Body Electric and all these songs, I went, cool, this album is like the same story that I'm trying to write. And then I got the little light bulb and I went, ooh, what if I sneak a whole bunch of lyrics into my novel? And I built my whole novel around so that everything, Beneath the Wheels is the whole climactic scene of my novel. And so I published it. I sent it to the agent. He sold it to Signet Books, which came out as a mass market original. And It came out with this garish science fiction paperback cover, and I'm realizing now I should have got a copy so I could show it in front of you. But this really ugly cover of a stone skull with a rocket ship flying over the top of it. And,
Yeah.
but I put in the acknowledgments to the book that this whole story was inspired by the haunting Rush album, Grace Under Pressure, and special thanks to Geddy Lee, Alex Lifeson, and Neil Peart. And when the book got published, I signed a copy, one copy to each of the three guys, and I packaged it up and I mailed it off to Mercury Records. Like, hey, what could go wrong? So I set it off, and I assumed it just went to the warehouse where the Ark of the Covenant is stored and never hear anything again. But about a year later, and in fact, I'll tell the whole story because it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So a year later, I'm working as a technical writer and technical editor at this big research lab, as you mentioned at the beginning.
Yes.
And I had a really this is a open podcast. I can use language. Yeah, I had a really shitty day. I mean, it was just one of those terrible days where one of these jobs that I was working for, this big important annual report that I've been working on for a year, finally got published at the technical lab, and to find out that the author's name was misspelled on the cover, and I had this rush photo order for the scientist who was going to Washington, D.C. for this big lasers conference. And it was all of his funding was dependent on this presentation. And I had to whip up we actually made physical view graphs at the time instead of like PowerPoints. Yeah. So you had to get these plastic things that you put on the view graph projector. And I'm rushing them all through the photo lab, and he's trying to go to the airport. And I finally get them all back to find out that they had printed every single one of the photos upside down. And I'm just like, ugh. And so my boss takes me into his office and reams me out. And at the same time, I'm a new author. I had published by now, I think I'd published my second or my third novel after the first one called Resurrection Inc.
Yeah. And
the very first time ever I had gotten a review in a major science fiction magazine was for my second novel. And it was Asimov Science Fiction Magazine, big, important science fiction magazine. And they just tore my book to shreds. They hated it. They insulted my mother. They're just, all of this is on the same day. So this was a really shitty day. And I come home from work, and I got the mail. I pull out the Safeway flyers and the electric bill. And there's this letter with a Canadian stamp on it. And the return address says N. Peart. And holy shit. And I opened it up, and it was Neil had read my book, and he wrote me a 3.5 page single space letter about how much he loved the novel. And at the end of his letter, he said, if you'd like to keep corresponding, I'd be open to that. I would love to hear from you.
Cool.
So it was no longer a shitty day, and I was perfectly happy with that.
Oh, I love how that works.
So I did have another. So
there is balance.
So
there is balance in the universe.
In fact, the 25th anniversary of ECW Press, the same publisher that did Clockwork Angels and Clockwork Lives, they reissued Resurrection Inc. Of course, the Rush album cover artist. So the guy who painted the cover for Grace Under Pressure painted the new edition of my Resurrection Inc. cover. And he put all kinds of little Easter eggs he's even got a little P over G buried in the artwork somewhere here. So all full circle. It's this wonderful thing. And I'll do my plug. It's called wordfireshop.com. I've got signed copies of all these books there. So all these ones that we're going to be talking about, if you wanted to grab a copy of it, they're all there. So there's the plug, but this is Resurrection Inc. And that was in 1990, I believe, that Neil wrote me back, and we corresponded ever since then, 30 some years. I've been backstage at every Rush concert since A Show of Hands. And he's stayed at our house a whole bunch of times, and we've gone to dinner together, hiking, mountain climbing, all kinds of stuff. He was he was a great friend of mine. So you are still muted. I'm sorry, John.
John?
Yes, I'm here.
There he is.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what happened. I lost something here. Yeah, I want to get more into that relationship in a moment. But since we may have some aspiring writers listening to the show, can you give them some suggestions? Techniques, methods, tips that might help them. And I'm not a fiction writer. I'm more of a historical nonfiction type writer. David McCullough, I really like his work in bringing kind of the dead back to life, giving them a voice, a new voice. I met McCullough once and I asked him for some suggestions on writing. And he said this, he said, Dickens, make me see. And I said, well, interesting, and I think that someone had asked Charles Dickens that same question 100 and something years ago. And Dickens says, just, illustrate what you are telling the reader, what you're demonstrating in your writing. Do you have any suggestions like that? And what if a historical nonfiction writer wants to write fiction? What are some of the channels into that new area of writing that you would suggest?
Well, the most important writing advice that I often give is not quite as profound as Dickens, but it's more pragmatic. I'll do the don't quit your day job. I mean, honestly and truly, that the publishing world has changed so drastically, just like it has been for the music industry, that you no longer need to go and find some big record label to sign up your band where you have these Saul Zaentz horribly abusive terms where the boy bands get abused and all that kind of stuff. You're now like an indie record label and everybody can make their own stuff, but that means you have to pound the pavement. You've got to do all the work. You've got to get it edited. You got to design your cover. You got to do, and I have always been an advocate that if you're a aspiring writer, you really need to understand the business. It's not enough just to write a good story. You've got to understand how everything works, and now more than ever. And so that's one of the things. It's a full-time job just to keep up with podcasts and Publishers Weekly and other writing seminars and business seminars and everything. So, that's the most important part. If you're trying to do this, and it is not easy, and I think the chances of somebody saying, I'm going to write a novel and make a living at it are vanishingly small, but, to do it, it's sort of like, I kind of like basketball. I think I want to win a gold medal at the Olympics for playing basketball.
Right.
Yeah, well, there's a big gap between one side of that and the other side of it. But it is possible for just about anybody to write and publish a novel. I mean, that your facility of doing that, just like if you're a band, you can produce your own album. You got GarageBand, various software on your Macintosh, you can do that. But as for writing, I think I said earlier, I covered the most important part, that you need ingredients. Don't just learn how to write a great metaphor and break down a sentence or something. You got to have ideas. You got to have information. You got to have characters, and that's how you study all of it.
Yeah.
And I've done the opposite of the historical nonfiction writer writing fiction. I've written a bunch of fantasy fiction, which requires a poop load of research into sailing ships and navigation systems and how do you, and what the printing press is and what the impact was, and does your fantasy world have gunpowder or not, and how do they have communication? Does it take 7 months to know that the king has died from one side of England to the other side? And if you understand all of that kind of stuff, then of course you have the background and then you have to convey it. And I've written a whole ton of books on writing techniques, so they can check out something of that.
Okay, good.
I think ahead, what you said though about understanding the business and how the business works, I cannot stress that enough, and I cannot just stress how important that is, because I get people emailing me too, and messaging me, and they're like, what tips can you give me to break into the business? And I tell them, just keep writing for 20 years and get used to hearing the word no, but keep going.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely the answer they don't want. They want to know where the side door is. Well, it's not there.
I'm like, dude, if I knew the shortcut, why would I have
one
rejection slips and taken 30 years to do it, right? So
yeah.
Well, there's also the art of the proposal letter, which if you can't get that down, that's there's a technique to that as well. Well, let's get into your two books because this show is about our love for the album Clockwork Angels, and we should get into your two books, Clockwork Angels and Clockwork Lives. And could you do me a favor? Can you define the word steampunk for us?
Well, steampunk is a genre. It's more like almost like a sensibility. So steampunk is, if you think about like what Jules Verne is, or what airships and steam engines and alchemy, and there's been, if you'll remember the old TV show The Wild Wild West, that was steampunk, and there's a lot of different books about it. The movie Hugo was, Hugo came out when Neil and I were writing Clockwork Angels, and he wrote me and said, "Have you seen this crap?" And I mean, he didn't call it crap. He meant exclamation, somebody else did what we were working on. So it's sort of a optimistic, high-tech, fantasy tech version of the end of the 19th century, maybe. I mean, there's a lot of steam engine cars and frock coats and things like that. So it's, but we use that as sort of I had written a couple. I wrote the life story of Captain Nemo,
right?
One of my novels, and I wrote this fantasy trilogy called Game Earth, where there's some Dr. Frankenstein and Jules Verne, our main characters, and they build gadgets and stuff all over the place. And Neil really liked those novels, and when the concept idea for Clockwork Angels came, he was sending me a whole bunch of emails like, explain this about the genre and how does this work, and because he was coming up with this idea and building it up with the steampunk carnival that he had and some airships and the Watchmaker, and so we brainstormed that a bunch, and then he started writing the songs and doing the concept album, and like, I'm geeky Rush fan back and forth, like that. This is really cool. I can't wait to it. And he sent me the first two tracks, which were BU2B and Caravan.
Yeah.
And so I'm listening to this, and they're just really cool ideas through it. And my wife and I went to have lunch with him at this diner in Santa Monica in, I forget what year, 2010 or something, when they were doing the album.
Yeah.
And Neil's just full of energy, and he's excited about how he loves this album, and it's some of the best music they've ever done. But it's not just going to be a concept album. It's going to be a Broadway musical, and it's going to be a novel, and it's going to be Ice Follies, and it's going to and I'm like Rush fanboy, and I'm thinking, cool, Ice Follies. my wife is listening closer, and she just says, like, excuse me, Neil, but this is going to be a novel? Who's going to write the novel? And Neil goes, well, Kevin is, of course. And then he goes on and on about the Ice Follies and things. So that's how he asked me to work with him, because he had the whole story mapped out. And there's Clockwork Angels. It looked like the cover. You've seen that on the album.
Right. So the writing of the book and the development of the album are kind of riding together?
The book was trailing a little bit. He didn't have all of the tracks finished.
Okay.
He had about half of them, but he had the story in his head. And so we were brainstorming. And then when Rush came, I live in Colorado. Rush came through, and they did 2 shows at Red Rocks for the Time Machine tour. Yep. And which is where they played the first 2 tracks, because the rest of the album didn't come out for, I think, 2 years later. So we're at Red Rocks. He plays 1 show, and then they have a day off, and then they play the second show. and so we saw the first show, and on the day in between, Neil and I went off to climb a 14,000 foot peak near Denver, because that's what you do on your day off, right?
Right.
So, because I had always climbed these, they're called 14ers, 14,000 foot mountains. And he had wanted to do one with me, and I picked, a very simple baby peak for a frail old drummer like Neil.
Yeah.
And so I picked him up at like 6 o'clock in the morning at his little dive motel on the outskirts of Denver, and we drove up and we hiked the mountain. And during that climb is when we brainstormed, because Neil, when you're plotting the story that's told in whatever it is, 11 tracks on the album.
Right.
I'm not good at quoting numbers. It's just,
yeah.
So don't send hate mail because I'm
no one will. No one
really 12 tracks.
12. There's 12 tracks, but that's fine.
So he's got all these tracks mapped out in the basic story, but he didn't really have all the details of the world building worked out, and what does the Watchmaker actually do, and what is the anarchist after, and where are the 7 cities of gold, and what does and so we had our young and innocent main character who was our hero, and we were plotting this story, but during the hike, that's when we filled in all the blanks and everything, and he didn't have a name for the main character. It was our hero, which we abbreviated as OH, which we decided our hero wasn't good enough, so we changed OH into Owen Hardy, and that was where the character came from.
Interesting.
And we plotted all that, and then I came home and outlined the whole thing and was planning to write it. Now, I'm going to write the novel with Neil based on the first Rush album in however many years. And Rush was about to go on a 2-year tour to promote this album. And you know that Rush is one of the absolute top-selling music acts in the history of humankind. And they sell to sellout crowds wherever they go. They got a giant fan base. I'm writing the novel of it, and to pat myself on the back, I've got 23 million copies of my own books in print, and I've had 50 bestsellers, and I'm no slouch either. I've got quite of a fan base, and I'm writing the novel Clockwork Angels, and we send it around to all the big New York publishers, and nobody wanted it.
Wow.
Literally they said, how do you write a novel based on an album? And
wow.
Do Rush fans even read? And so we just went, what is going on here? I mean, I've got the biggest thing in my career, or one of the biggest things.
Right.
And we can't get anybody interested. And we were getting really discouraged because we needed to have it go quickly. I mean, New York publishing doesn't go that fast, but we wanted a book out while Rush was still on tour. Otherwise, you kind of defeat the purpose there. And so Neil said, well, I really like my Canadian publisher, ECW, the ones that had done his traveling music and
right.
a bunch of his other books. And so we sent it to them, and they, of course, took about a nanosecond to say, we'd love to do this. And because it's a Canadian publisher, the Canadian government has grants for the arts, and so they provided some subsidy to ECW so they could put beautiful full color paintings by Hugh Syme throughout the book, and
nice.
And it turned out to be quite astonishingly beautiful. And the book came out the very first week. It instantly hit the New York Times bestseller list.
Wow.
And I remember the day, and it was on Neil's 60th birthday. And he was just about to go up on stage for a show somewhere in New Hampshire, I think it was. And I was able to text him before going up. I said, not only are you an adequate drummer, you are also a New York Times best-selling author. So that was kind of my birthday present for.
What did you think? What did you think of Neil's writing? That's amazing, and congratulations to you.
Yeah.
What did you think of Neil's writing style? Just not the music, the lyrics, but the quality of his writing and his storytelling within his own books, like Ghost Rider.
His prose writing was, I mean, he's a ridiculously intelligent person, and his writing was great. In fact, we would, my wife and I would often just read one of his books aloud to each other when we were driving around in the car. I remember spending like 5 months reading Roadshow to each other as we're going through. But no, he was always a wonderful, thoughtful essayist. But I mean, his letters to me, he'd be writing these, they're 7-page long single space letters and just on and endlessly interesting. And we'd have these, and this is like real letters rather than email. And I remember once kind of joking with him because I said, I'm sorry it took so long for me to respond, but it's intimidating to respond to your letters. And I said something about he would go on at Peartian lengths, and he was kind of thinking about that. And they said, no, you got 7 single space pages here. But he was always full of interesting ideas and stuff.
My take on him really was that he was a prose writer more than anything else.
Yeah.
And his real inclination was to, just kind of go off for a long time. And, just in his sentence structure and the rhythm of the language and all that sort of thing, this was a prose writer. And Rush was the only sort of like, the format, because you're doing music and it has to fit into a certain meter and cadence and all that sort of thing. Rush is the only context I can think of where it was okay to give him those sort of limitations and sort of challenge him to work within the framework of, no, you need to get this across in this many words in this amount of time. Outside of that context, it seemed to me like he could just go on forever,
Right. But he wasn't a fiction writer. He never thought of himself as a fiction writer. And in fact, our very first thing that we did was a short story called Drum Beats that we did in 93 or 4 or something, that I got invited to write a short story for this anthology called Shock Rock 2. That's the stories about rock music.
Alice Cooper.
And so Neil was sending me all these descriptions of his bicycle rides through Africa. He'd go to these weird villages, and here's this guy all by himself just bicycling through the wilds of Africa. And he would send me pages and pages of these most lavish descriptions of the landscape and everything. And I came up with an idea about how about we do a creepy dark fantasy story about this rock drummer bicycling through Africa, and he finds a weird village where they make drums using human skin for the heads. And he liked that idea, but it wasn't like we would write the story together. I wrote the story, but then I just stole all of his descriptions of all of the landscape of Africa and the village and the characters and everything. That was just pulled from his nonfiction writing.
Wow.
And after Neil passed away, we kept thinking about doing a beautiful, like, illustrated version of this book. And when we put the ebook version up many years, 2010 or something like that, Neil wrote this special afterword for it, this big long afterword about working with me and doing the story. And so that was in the ebook, but we had never actually put it in print. And like so many things in life, it was we'll get around to it when there's time, and we'll get around to it. And then Neil passed away in January, and I did fuck it, we waited too long. And that really kind of lit a fire under me. So I wrote my own little introduction, forward, appreciation. We got a wonderful Canadian painter, Steve Otis, who's also a huge Rush fan, who really wanted to do something. In fact, I posted in my social media that I was going to finally put together this pretty illustrated edition of Drum Beats. Had the afterword by Neil and a new forward. And I was just thinking I was going to find some stock art about African villages and things like that. And so Steve Otis just writes me and says, do you need art for that? I'd be happy to do some art for it. And so we put together this beautiful illustrated edition that we initially released as an 800 copy signed, limited, numbered with the artist's signature and my signature on it. And of course that sold out instantly. And just now, and your timing is great. So here's drum beats. Does that show up forward or backward? I hope it doesn't show
No, it
up.
works. Yeah, it's good.
And this is Steve Otis's beautiful paintings in it.
Ooh.
And we've got his illustrations throughout.
Wow.
So anyway, that all sold out many months ago, but in next week, we're releasing the normal trade edition of it. So you can get the ebook or hardcover or trade paperback. Just look up Drum Beats on Amazon or go to the wordfireshop.com and you can get it. But I'm just so happy with that. And I getting phone calls from some of the people who were close to Neil reading this, and email from his wife Carrie and stuff. I'm very, very proud of being able to do that. So
that's awesome. So is Clockwork Lives Part 2 of Clockwork Angels? I mean, how do you categorize this?
Well, Clockwork Lives, like this shirt here,
yep,
or the actual book. See,
yep.
I brought my props because we're just sitting here.
Yeah.
It's awesome, dude.
Nicely done, by the way.
So Clockwork Angels was like the story of Owen Hardy and his steampunk world, his adventure with the Watchmaker and the Anarchists and the Wreckers, the Seven Cities of Gold, and all the characters he meets and all the places he explores. And we finished that, and we kept talking for a long time about eventually we wanted to do another book in that universe because we were so in love with the characters and all the setup and everything. But it just took, like, we couldn't figure out how to do the story, because we had a bunch of short stories, but I didn't want to just do here's a book of short stories. And we finally figured out a way to weave it all together into one big novel. So it's almost like a steampunk Canterbury Tales with the stories of all of the characters, or a lot of the characters that you met in Clockwork Angels, plus some new ones. And it's got a new main character who's got basically a quest to collect stories. And that, honestly, Clockwork Lives, of the 170 books that I've published, that one is my favorite.
Wow.
And Neil loved it. He said it was even better than Clockwork Angels, and he read it and wrote me afterward that this is surely your finest work.
Wow.
And won the Colorado Book Award, and I'm just so utterly pleased with it. And we even took, this is my last prop, I promise.
Go for it.
It's so pretty that we did a graphic novel version of it. And it's got different artists for each of the different stories.
Yeah.
And the steampunk carnival and the wreckers and all that stuff. It's just I just love that book. And I posted this before, so it's not like a giant scoop, but Neil and I were working on a third one called Clockwork Destiny. Bunch of notes, and the idea was inspired by Neil. He figured out what to do for the third one, and every time we talked, we would like kind of bounce some ideas around. So I have files full of ideas, and I just was in no creative place to do anything after Neil passed away, and it took a long time. And finally, I wrote to Carrie and I said, I've got these notes. It's kind of weighing on me, and I really want to do it, but I won't do anything unless I have your blessing. And she said, absolutely, I'd love to have me do it. So I'm kind of hoping by the end of the year, I'll get to start on working on it. I'm a little bit busy right now because you may have seen the trailer for the new Dune movie coming out. I've been working. And I write a bunch of the Dune novels. We have another Dune due by the year, and I got a monthly comic series for Dune that I'm working on. So that's kind of sucking up the emergency time. Yeah. But it's kind of good because Clockwork Destiny, did I tell the title already? Clockwork Destiny. Yep. It's the sort of thing that you just sort of need to age like fine wine or stinky cheese or something like that. It's just, and I'm intimidated as hell by this book because Clockwork Lives is my favorite book, and I've set the bar so high, and Neil liked it so much, and there's so much there you don't just say, let's just knock off the continuing adventures of Owen Hardy and
Right.
get it out of here. And so it's got to be worthy, and it's got to be good enough. And I'm probably going to be the hardest critic on it, but it also has to be done. I got to do it. So
Do you have a favorite song off of Clockwork Angels? Before we had you on the show, we were talking about we picked two of our favorite songs and kind of discussed a little bit about the background of the song and how they were working it out in the studio. Do you have a favorite song off of that album?
I have a favorite song of all of them. It's The Garden. I mean, The Garden is just the most incredible song that they've ever done. And the day Neil wrote it, and John, you're frozen up here, so I'm just going to keep talking.
Yeah, keep talking.
The day Neil wrote it, he sent me, I think I wrote the best, most beautiful song lyrics that I've ever done.
Yeah.
And he was so pleased that the measure of your life is not how many cars you have or how many houses and everything, but it's the amount of love and respect that you have. So that song is just so profound to me, and it still just moves me so much when I hear it.
Yeah.
But the other one, though, in fact, the one that's the ringtone on my phone, the one that really summarizes so much is Headlong Flight for me.
Yeah.
All the journeys of the great adventure, it didn't always seem that way, but I wish that I could live it all again. And that just kind of summarizes mine too, that I think life, it's like this headlong, you got to experience everything you can and see things and do it. And remember, I do mountain climbing and hiking all over the place. And some of these adventures are pretty awful adventures. You're stuck in a blizzard, or you get rained out, or you're hiding from lightning all over the place, and you're wet and bedraggled and hungry, and then you get a flat tire trying to drive out of the four-wheel drive road. And one of our common phrases is, at some point, this will seem amusing. But it doesn't feel that way when it's happening to you.
While you're doing it, right? That's amazing. Well, you've had such a special relationship with Neil, and thank you so much for taking us, behind the scenes of that collaboration. What are some of the biggest questions you've had from Rush fans?
The nice, and I mean this in a really nice way, they haven't pestered me a lot. I mean, they don't ask questions because they know Neil was such a private person, and it was kind of a very long time for me to, I mean, I'm not going to sit around with the beer and tell Neil stories all the time, because Neil didn't, I've told a couple of them, and I say some things, and he's repeated some of them himself, and like he's written about stuff he and I did in Roadshow and other places and on his blogs. But I'm not interested in doing sort of like this is what Neil was really like. And he was really like what y'all thought he was really like. I mean, I have a very close, we've talked about this, that I'm still very close with the other circle around Neil, like his writing companion, Michael, and Don Perry, the drummer from Jethro Tull, is one of my very best friends, and Matt Scannell from Vertical Horizon, and some of Neil's caretakers, and all. This circle of people that are now friends because Neil brought us all together was it's still very strong, and I think his lyrics bound us all together, and just the outpouring after Neil passed away was overwhelming. I mean, it was very hard.
Yeah, it was hard for a lot of people that loved Rush so dearly. As somebody that I didn't know Neil personally, but because of the prolificity of his work and his body of work and how it impacted, and how special it was, made you feel like you knew him in some way. And I don't think I've ever had the death of somebody impact me in the way that Neil did when I didn't even know who he was. And I think that's kind of a testament to how significant he was as a songwriter, as a lyricist, as an artist, as a human being.
And one of the funny things was that he, as a Rush fan, when I first started to get to know him, I had all these Rush questions like, what did you mean in this lyric? And what were you thinking about that? Right. And he just wasn't interested in talking about stuff like that. He wrote the
yeah, all done. Yeah, they're in the can, right?
I feel like a lot of what he wrote it's self-explanatory. Like even like when he gets into like really deep stuff, like the body electric, for example. It is possible, the way that it's written and everything, that the lyrics are maybe a little too esoteric for the average listener to get into, but to me it made perfect sense. First time I heard it, I was like, oh yeah, 1001, yeah, that's binary code for the, and that's not for everybody. Of course I get that, but he wrote in a way where it was complex, but it was still understandable. You could still relate to it. And I mean, I didn't know him either, but in a lot of ways, I felt like he phrased things in a way that made it feel like he knew me. And he was just able to put things into words that I was never able to, and do it so succinctly and with so few words. And I just know over the years from talking to other fans, I know they felt that way too, that he just kind of got it. And he not only got it, but he got it at a level that was maybe even a little past where I got it. Like there were times I felt like he understood me better than I understood myself. And I don't feel like his lyrics were complex, but I don't feel like they needed clarification. I feel like it was all self-explanatory and all there right up in front. And so I can understand you saying like that he didn't want to really get into it because it was there already. And it's like, if you don't get it, then that's maybe more on you than on him. And I can sort of, I imagine he worked very laboriously on the lyrics, and it was exactly what he wanted. And after that, just being like, I did it. I'm done talking about it. Yeah. And also, I mean, I think for most artists, if you're making good art, it's understood by the people who experience it, and that's what he did. The whole band did. They did things that were musically complex, lyrically complex, that sort of thing, that never felt like I don't get this. It came across somehow. Sorry, I'm rambling. Please continue. I tend to do that. Sorry.
Like after Clockwork Angels that we did that. I mean, I was intimidated to work with him because Neil is such a perfectionist. I thought this could just be a nightmare in the wake that would destroy our friendship. But no, he was so supportive, and he just loved everything. And Clockwork Angels turned out so well. And so of course I said, well, now Neil, the next one we should do is I need to write the novel of 2112. And he just instantly just went, no, that's so old. Nobody wants to hear that. And, I mean,
I want to hear it.
I want to hear that. He just like, nobody wants to read the book of 2112. But we did something, and Neil wasn't directly involved in this, but I, with another author, I edited an anthology called 2113, which is all science fiction stories inspired by Rush songs. And for my piece in it, I wrote the novella 2113, which is the opening lines are "Attention all planets of the Solar Federation." So it's my sequel, nice. 2112, which I wrote, and I'm rather proud of that. But
nice.
He just, the very idea of doing a novel of 2112, he was just like, oh no, that's so outdated. No, that it has no relevance anymore. Nobody wants to know it. And
yeah.
So Kevin, where can folks learn more about what you do? Do you have a landing space on the internet or what?
Yeah, so my main home webpage is wordfire.com. And as I mentioned before, all of these books that I was showing off, you can just get signed copies, signed by me, signed copies for cover price at wordfireshop.com. There's a whole bunch of stuff there, and there's some kind of high-end collectibles also signed by Neil and numbered and slipcased and stuff. And my own publishing house is wordfirepress.com. See kind of a consistent through line there that Wordfire is our company. Let's see, if you want to find me on Facebook, just look for official Kevin J. Anderson. I've got a page. And on Twitter, I'm the word the plus my initials, KJA. And I post a lot. I interact a lot on social media with all the different news and everything. And like right now, we've got a brand new Dune novel called The Duke of Caladan that comes out on October 13th. And so we're kind of promoting that a lot and posting a lot of things from that and revamping the Dune page. Now, thanks to the pandemic, I'm not traveling anywhere or doing any book signings or public appearances, which is kind of cutting us off at the knees for a lot of our stuff.
Yeah.
But conversely, one of the things that I can do is I can still go mountain climbing and I can still go hiking because I go by myself. And, I really managed to persevere and to survive. I interact with people like you guys at little tiny windows on my Zoom screen.
I know, right? Talk about science fiction.
Yeah.
We ask this of all of our guests. Can you please list your top 5 Rush albums?
And live albums are allowed.
And live albums are allowed. Top 5.
Albums, Clockwork Angels, I love. Grace Under Pressure.
In what order? 5 through 1, leading to the 1.
Yeah.
You can't make me do this off the top of my head. I could just let's see.
We can and we do.
Can.
So.
I'm not going to put them in order because I'm going to remember them. So, Grace Under Pressure was huge for me. Clockwork Lives was huge for me. I really love Hold Your Fire. I love Roll the Bones. And let's see. Boy, filling that 5th slot, there's so much good to go with it. Maybe Presto. Just lately, Presto. Presto wasn't up there for me, but the last year or two, I've just, like the song Scars never sunk into me, but it really does now. And Presto really does now. The song Available Light is just wrecks me.
It's a great tune.
Incredible.
Great tune.
So,
yeah.
you know what I think it is that, and don't hate me. I don't really love the opening cut, the Show Don't Tell. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
But like the rest of the album is just so amazingly good.
Yeah.
So
Superconductor.
I'm not in order, but those are 5 albums.
Thank you very much. Well, it's been a real pleasure having you on our show,
Yes.
and thank you. I'm a new writer, and I love to hear the stories of your journey as a writer, what you went through, and just the suggestions and opening my eyes to the publishing world and writing techniques and all that. So for me, it's been a special pleasure, and hopefully for our audience as well. And congratulations on such an amazing career, and so incredible. So you have a lot to be proud of, and also, giving Rush fans something else to look at and to read and to kind of expand the universe of Rush in some way has been, I think, a real treat. And I know a lot of fans feel that way. So,
can I say one more thing that I forgot?
Of course. Yeah.
The Clockwork Angels audiobook, which again on the WordFire Shop thing, I have the CDs that you can buy, but otherwise just download it from Audible or whatever. Neil loved the novel so much that he is the reader for the audiobook.
Oh.
So if you listen to Clockwork Angels, it's Neil reading you the story of Owen Hardy and the Watchmaker and everything. And he's got a beautiful voice, and I can't listen to it right now, but
yeah,
Rush fans might want to hear him talk for whatever it is, 10 hours to read the book.
If I may, the time will come when you'll be able to listen to it, and it will bring you great joy, and you will not think about what you lost. And the time will come when you think about Neil, and you'll remember him and all the good times that you had and everything, and you will not think about this moment right now that we're all still feeling it. We're all still very much grieving the fact that he's gone, but the time will come. I promise you.
It's kind of a special treat for Rush fans if you want to just put your headphones on and listen to Neil reading to your ear. So it's a great book.
Well, Dan, any more questions for Kevin?
I just wanted to make the observation that I'm not surprised that you connected with them via the Grace Under Pressure album, because to me, of all the stuff that they've done, at least up until Clockwork Angels, that's the most sci-fi sounding album to me. And people tend to overlook that because to them, that's the album where they started using more keyboards, which is controversial for some Rush fans. They were a big part of what they did, you know, and you have to take them for what they did. But I remember specifically Grace Under Pressure, the first time I heard it, feeling it had this like very like chilly, futuristic kind of feel to it. And it's not surprising to me at all that it resonated with you the way that it did, being a science fiction writer. That's not a question.
It's my favorite album. I mean, it is my favorite
record.
Rush album. Yeah, it never gets picked as a favorite. It's my favorite.
I don't know why. There's no bad songs on it.
It's on there.
It's on your list. It's on your list. Yeah, I feel as though when we asked,
Body Electric is one of my favorite Neil performances. Yeah. That whole record is amazing performances by him.
Yeah, I mean, when we ask folks to pick their top five, it's not based on musicality or lyrics or anything like that, or album sales, the typical stuff. It's really about how each album touches you and in what way. Yeah. Like I would consider Roll the Bones in my top five because it came at a time where I was really I was having a difficult time in my life, and I kind of absorbed the lyrics and took in the lyrics, and they helped me get through that time. And that's an important album for me. But you know, I think everyone can say that about a certain album that Rush put out, is that it helped them in some way. I hear it over and over and over. And also relating to Clockwork Angels, several people that we've had on the show say that the Clockwork Angels is their favorite album. And what's incredible about Clockwork Angels, I don't know if it's some sort of prophecy or something, but how, you know, you had Snakes and Arrows, which I don't necessarily, I like Snakes and Arrows a lot. It's not one of my favorites. It has some great tracks, but then comes Clockwork Angels. And I said to Dan, I'm like, well, Snakes and Arrows was almost like kind of a warm up, a way to get kind of a practice to Clockwork Angels. And to have The Garden as the final song of the last album of this band's prolific careers, it's not eerie. It's kind of like, whoa. You know, it's the cosmos working or something, right? I mean, how does that happen? Was it meant to be? You know, it's.
I mean, what do you do after that?
I know exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, guys, I honestly have another interview in 20 minutes, and people have been texting me saying, "Are you on that or not?" So I better go and reassure them. So
thank you,
guys.
Take care, man. Bye bye.
Thank you for coming.
Let me know when this is up, and I'll share it.
I will.
Absolutely.
Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Wow, what a great show.
Yeah, seriously. I have to admit, when I was telling him that the time will come when he will want to listen to that audiobook and it will give him good memories, I got a little something in my eye while I was talking about that. We're still feeling this a lot. And you know, time has passed and other things have happened, but every so often I still get those moments of like, wow, that is just terrible that he's gone.
It is. But
time passes and gets easier.
Yeah, I mean, for Rush fans especially, since we're so passionate about the band, we'll probably never ever get over the fact that Neil is not in our world anymore. However, the reason why this podcast exists is because Neil is gone, and we needed a way to get it out of our system and talk about it, and then kind of, you know, as they say, it's good to have people around who share the same sympathies and condolences and are reeling in the same sadness, to embrace each other and get through it in that way. And, you know, look at all the beautiful, wonderful things that Rush has inspired that have gone on to flourish and spark new industries and spark new adventures, spark new focuses in the arts and like I've always said, in writing and painting and music and what have you. So just the garden keeps growing, right? And so we're
Yes.
we're by having this podcast, we're
Oh, yeah.
nurturing the garden that Neil started, right?
Yeah, we're doing what we can to expand the legacy and just kind of be a part of it and do what we can to keep it afloat.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
And I mean, it's not just us. I see, kids on YouTube today reacting to Tom Sawyer for the first time, and that does my heart good. It's like this is going to go on forever.
exactly.
But people like us are a part of that.
Well, Dan, that's another episode of Two Guys Talking Rush in the can, and it was a good one. And my name is John Kane.
I am the delightful Dan Buckspan.
And this is another episode of Two Guys Talking Rush. And what can I say, folks? Rush rules.
Two guys are talking, rush 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 two guys.
Live music inspires millions around the world, but the concerts we all enjoy wouldn't be possible without the countless crew members working behind the scenes. As COVID-19 puts concerts on pause, we want to extend a helping hand to the touring and venue crews who depend on shows to make a living. Crew Nation was created to do just that. Crew members are the backbone of the live music industry, and we hope you'll join us in supporting them through this temporary intermission until we can once again unite millions around the world through the power of live music. Crew Nation is powered by Music Forward Foundation, a charitable 501c3 organization that will be administering the fund. Live Nation has committed $10 million to Crew Nation, contributing an initial $5 million to the fund, then matching the next $5 million given by artists, fans, and employees dollar for dollar. Please support Crew Nation at www.livenationentertainment.com/Crew Nation.